What is going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, a super serious business podcast for only the most serious business people. And today I have my most serious friend on the show, Michelle. Oh my God, I'm going to butcher this last name. And we just talked about this for like 10 minutes. Michelle, please tell everybody how to say your last name before I get canceled on the internet for just completely obliterating it.
Take a shot. You gotta take a shot.
Moujaes.
Oh, you did it perfect. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Michelle Moujaes, the founder of Faithtree. Michelle, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And you're off the hook because none of my family, none of us, we don't say the last name because it's a little tricky. So we let my husband say it, and then we kind of just skirt around it. So you're off the hook.
So next time I'm going to make sure we get him on to help me out with the intro. Well, but now I've said it once, so I don't have an excuse anymore. So I've kind of, I got to roll with it. Well, I know who you are. We've been friends for a few months now, maybe 6 months or so, but I would love for you to take a minute, just give everybody the brief overview of who is Michelle.
Who is Michelle? Well, thanks for having me. It's exciting to get to participate in your good work. Well, I am Michelle Moujaes. I grew up here in Los Angeles, and I have the blessing of being involved with a nonprofit called Faithtree Resources. And so Faithtree is an organization that's really excited about helping Christians learn and live the faith. That's what we do, is we want to see Christian churches thriving. We want to see communities around Christian churches thriving, because we know that when a church is healthy, the marriages in the area are healthier. There is less addiction. There is less crime. There is less, all the things we don't want. And we believe that transformation can come from God through the local church or parish. And so our organization makes resources to help people do that, which, we have a passion for speaking. We call it speaking in the language of our day, and getting people involved in learning about the faith in a way that they understand. Because I'm not the smartest kid at school. And so it really came about as an opportunity for me to also understand what it was I was professing to believe, and in simple layman's terms, which doesn't always happen in theology. So it's a little bit about what I do. I'm married to the nicest man on the planet, for sure, 100%. He's extraordinary. And we have 4 kiddos together, 3 boys and a girl, and they're my world. And they're so patient with me while I run around the country pretending to be a priest. And we have a good time.
I love the Michelle public speaking stories. You know, we work together. You're a client of High Beam, and I get to hear some of that stuff offhand, and it's great. But I do have a question about how Faithtree started. Is it an extension of you trying to live something out, or like how did Faithtree come to be?
So Faithtree actually started. So just a little bit about my background. I worked in film and television. I actually started, it's ridiculous to say, but as a child actor way back in the day, and went on to go onto the stage. So I did a little bit of television, went to the stage, pursued an education, kind of made my way through that realm, and ended up behind the scenes in casting. So I spent a lot of time in film and television casting. And at the same time, passionate about my own faith journey and drawing closer to God. And when I moved back to Los Angeles. I had been on the East Coast once I was married, and we had our first 3 kids on the East Coast. And when I moved back, our parish priest said, can you help us see where people are in the church? Like, there's a lot of disengaged people. Why? And so we started just for one church here in Van Nuys, California, which was the question we were seeking to answer, is why were people disconnected? Like, why were they on the periphery? Right? You have this beautiful community and people are there all with the same professed intention. But what we found was there was a disconnect between like how we pay our bills, or like the fight we're having with our husband, or why our kid is a total jerk, and what we knew to be true from the Christian faith. So we wanted to bridge that gap, if you would. And after I kind of left film and television, I got an MSW in macro organizing and community organizing, and particularly with communities of faith. And I had done some work with some really cool organizations around organizing. So it was kind of a natural fit. And our priest was like, get in there and let's see what we can do. So that's essentially how we started, was just one small church. And, God was good to us. We had 3 people, I think, at our first meeting. And by the end of the first year, we had served like 1,500 people coming through, wanting to know, like, how do we fight with people? And how do you forgive people when they suck? And, whatever it was. And so it kind of just grew from there. So now we have an audience that is much bigger than we anticipated it would be. And we just every day wake up and we're like, oh my God, we're so going to get caught for being fakers. It's not going to work, but we keep trying. So,
Hey, that's an interesting word there, fakers, because we hear the phrase "fake it till you make it" all the time. And I'm a
yeah.
yeah, I'm a two-time entrepreneur, and it's interesting you have the acting background too, so I'm sure there's something there as well. But the thing about faking it until you make it, there's a level of reasonableness to that mantra, like because you if you wait to be ready to start something, it'll never happen. You'll never start. You'll never get married. You'll never have kids. You'll never start the business. You'll never grow the business. You'll never do anything different than what you're doing now because your truth is you'll never be ready, right? And so it's interesting to me that I think every entrepreneur I've ever talked to, every leader I've ever talked to has that, what do they call it, imposter syndrome
Yeah, for
behind them.
sure. Oh, I have it the worst. I'm the worst. And we all go into it expecting that we're going to be like, nail something. It's going to be awesome. Just hang on and like, you know, it'll just come. It doesn't. It doesn't, right? Like you have to fail, I think, 20 times before you actually get it right. Because if you already knew how to do it, then you just keep doing what you'd already done. But for many
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, we're trying to do stuff that's never happened. Certainly in our organization, we're making it up as we go along. We don't even know what it will look like or could look like because we haven't done it before. So, there's some best practices we try and follow, and we look at models of people who've done it really, really well, and we try and steal everything we can, not steal, borrow, learn
The
from.
technical term is called best practices.
There you go. So we try and like loop into what people have already done because why start at ground zero? But it makes absolutely no sense that we would put pressure on ourselves to think that we would nail it in the first go round, right? Like you don't walk without falling ever. So
Why do you think we put pressure on ourselves to get it right the first time out? Like, why does that actually matter to us?
that's a
Until
good.
we get to the other side where it's like it didn't actually matter and we don't actually care that we didn't get it right the first time, but we will not start something in fear of not getting it right the first time.
Yeah, I think we have been conditioned a lot through the education system and kind of, certainly now you get me started with social media and all the different you know, ways that we take in information. So there is this concept of everybody else is nailing it and got it perfect, which
Yeah.
personally that I feel that that's just a load. But
Yeah.
I think that we're always pushing instead of really cultivating where we thrive or what we're great at. We're always kind of pushed to consider what everybody else is great at, or consider what, for example, if one of my kids fails a math test, what do we do? We're like, you got to study math, you got to study math, you got to study math, you got to study math. But we don't even take into consideration that he's rocking it in English, that, he was designed by God to go kill it in English. Like, let's cultivate that a little bit. But I
Yeah.
just think that's the deficit perspective that in the world we've kind of trained ourselves to think through. So,
Yeah, I do find that fascinating. I will tell you that so 10 years ago I started shooting videos for the barbecue restaurant that I used to own, and I didn't realize how much content got left on the editing room floor, so
yeah.
to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And so you might have a 4-minute video that may have had 30 minutes of actual footage behind it. And so 26 minutes got cut out. So if I actually posted that full unedited 30 minutes or even longer, a lot of times, you would be like, this is the most boring thing ever because it doesn't show the figuring it out, or like if you're in the grinding, figuring it out part of the video, like it's more of a montage. It just chops
Mhm.
along. There's some pace to it. It's the Rocky training scene, right? Back to your acting
Yes,
stuff
yes,
earlier. It's
right.
really cool music, some cool time lapses, some cool like we're punching bags or whatever. But it was actually like hours and hours and hours to make that happen. So I do think it's a real hurdle that especially new entrepreneurs have to get over and I don't think it ever goes away, even if you become a seasoned business owner. It's still going to be, you're going to enter a new market, you're going to launch a new product line, and you're still going to have that moment where you go, is this actually the right thing? Are we actually doing what we should be doing? Do I actually know what I'm doing? Or is somebody going to come along and just pop the balloon and all the air is going to be let out and everybody's going to know?
Yeah, it's a real consideration. And I would tell you, if I could go back and tell myself, 10 years ago before this work started with Faithtree, um, well, I tell myself a lot of things, but one of the things I wish I could say is it always takes longer than it takes. And you just have to assume that it's going to take longer than it takes. Because I can set, I'll put, we put some padding on that calendaring of whatever event it is or whatever production we're doing. But the bottom line is that little like splicing, like for one of we have a project for teenage mental health that it's called the Relationship Project. And it's been really interesting as we formulated that content. But we spent 3 weeks shearing 1 second or a half a second off of different videos in the series. And you think, does it really matter? But it does. That little like sand kernel minutia makes for a really different product. But I think once you go through that process, it helps imposter syndrome because you know that you've done what it takes, right? So
Yeah.
it does help. But anything, I mean, whatever you're doing, whatever I've done in any realm, like whether it's for business, whether it's with your kids and it's just a conversation, or with your spouse, like all in one. We tell our kids, this is what the analogy that we use for our kids. If you imagine that there's a brick wall and you're building a brick wall, and by the end of the brick wall, you'll have this like really huge sustaining whatever, like side of a house, or something to keep out all the wolves or the coyotes or whatever. It's a brick at a time. You have to go a brick at a time. But what we want to do now, because, right, we see like the highlight reel and the Rocky training video montage, we just want the wall to show up, and we want to throw in a bunch of brick, and we want to throw on all the like cement in between. But it really is an intentional placing of a brick at a time. And that's where I think you get really great work, is when you do that deep dive, which we don't allow for a lot.
Well, I think what you're talking about there is becoming a bricklayer versus somebody that just is somebody that enjoys owning a wall or whatever it is you're actually building. It's about a internal identity shift, right? I first heard about this concept in James Clear's Atomic Habits, and he talks about becoming a do what?
Is that where I got it from? Because I read that book, but I didn't.
No.
Let's give credit. Good
possibly, but there is a thing about, like, it's not just, the example everybody always understands is fitness, right? Because we all have the same fitness journey, or we all have the same thing. We might have different careers, but we all have to get in shape, right? So everybody understands the fitness analogy. So the analogy is not to become somebody that lost a whole bunch of weight or is skinny or whatever, is healthy. The point of that is to become somebody that is so closely identified with somebody that goes to the gym. And I think that anytime we launch a new initiative for high beam marketing, we have this podcast, for instance, right? I think this is episode, this might be 20. I think we're getting close to that. Nice. And, every episode gets like in the dozens of listens. And so somebody from the outside would look at that. And by the way, with social media, you get to see the performance metrics from the outside. You can go to YouTube right now and see how many views this video got. You can go to Facebook and see how many watches the reel clip got that we did. And from the outside looking in, you would go, wow, you guys are failing. Because like when I compare you to Joe Rogan's podcast, for instance, the literal largest podcast in the world, you're not even showing up on the radar. Mm-hmm. And the thing is like nobody remembers Joe's first 4 episodes, first 20 episodes, first 30 episodes, or his, like, even worse than that, nobody remembers his first like 20 years doing junky stand-up stages everywhere, or his Fear Factor years. Like, there is so much stuff, like we talked about maybe a little bit offline, was there's just 30 years to be an overnight success, but it's more about like, what do you want to become? And so when you're looking at being an entrepreneur, just understand being an entrepreneur, the identity associated with that, in my mind, is somebody that is willing to go out and try things, fail 9 times out of 10, but the 10th time that you get it right is the thing that propels you and the whole local economy forward and everything else. And one of the things I really identify with Faithtree's mission is a strong church community makes for a strong community as a whole. And I truly believe that a strong small business community makes for a better community as a whole. Yep. And so I'd love for you to take a minute to explain, how important is it as a small business owner, especially somebody like you that sells a digital product, like how important is it to have a community of like-minded people around you to help you survive the trials that are small business?
So important. And to piggyback on what you said, like, for example, with Joe Rogan, who I think is hilarious and brilliant in his way. He does a lot of great work, but I'm not called to do what he's doing. And so I think one of the things that we put forth, and we put tremendous pressure on ourselves, and for the generation that's coming behind us, we put so much pressure on them. Like, this is what success looks like. But I don't think for all of us, we're called to be Joe Rogan. And in fact, for Faithtree, for me personally, the focus on the local, right? Not this whole like global, like, our organization is rooted in the Orthodox Christian tradition. And so we have a term that we reject. We say, our team, we don't want to be ortho famous. We have no desire to be the next like Orthodox Christian podcaster. Like, if we could do that and it's helpful for our mission, or if it brings glory to God, like, great, we're in. But just so that we can feel like we have the next book or the next thing, like that's not for everybody. That's some people's route. And maybe at some point it'll be part of our route. But I think really mitigating the expectation of what a win looks like is super important. So that would be number one. Number two is I think that bringing that to a place where we look at the guy right in front of us and the person right next to us, or the church right in front of us, or the small business right in front of us, right? Like, you're part of a community. And one of the things that has been tragic since we had the lockdown is that a problem that was already so relevant, which is isolation, has just been exacerbated. So now we have people who are literally, you know, we've stripped ourselves away from each other and we've forgotten ourselves because we are meant to be in relationship. Like, there's just no, researchers show it, theology will show it, doesn't matter what faith tradition you're from, right? Any scientist that you talk to, like, we were not designed to be isolated. And
Yeah.
so going back to the Joe Rogan example, I would say, like, I think we have to mitigate our expectations of what we're actually looking to achieve. So if people look and they're like, oh, you got a couple dozen things, great, right? So we have, for the program I was telling you, the relationship project, we have multiple churches who've reached out to us and said, this program was responsible for the saving of a life in my parish, right? Like, some kid in my church came to us and asked for help and said they wouldn't otherwise, but because of the conversation we had. So if my metrics of success are only that we get 6,000 clicks on that video or that social post or whatever, I've missed a whole lot of benefit that just didn't play by the world's metrics, right?
Yeah.
So I guess
Well, it's about your identity in that moment, right? You're saying as an organization and as a leader of that organization that we identify as people that care about actual one-to-one impact versus like just massive media numbers. Like, if you're running a big major cable network, like, you do care about big major numbers. Like, that is the thing that drives your
revenue.
advertising dollars, which is your most important metric, right? And so it makes sense that they would focus on that. But just because, you know, a Fox or a CNN or whomever does that doesn't mean that you should do that as a small
That's
business
right.
as well. Like you're saying, as a organization, we identify as, we're going to, like, one life is not too little.
That's right.
It
That's
is, one is so far greater than zero in Faithtree's mind that it's worth whatever effort took, because we're talking about something so serious there, right? It's not just like getting the next pair of Nike shoes or whatever. Like,
right.
this is a really big deal. And that's why I love working with you, is that you guys are playing in like really heavy stuff. I mean, like the relationship project stuff that we work on together with the mental health angle is incredibly fascinating to me. And I think for the young people that are taking that course, it's been life changing from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And I would love to take a second and just unpack mental health in business leaders and entrepreneurs, because it is like we talked about, it's a lonely thing. You can have a issue with faking it till you make it, like we talked about earlier as well. But there's such an internal battle going on. Like, what are some of the tools or techniques you use to try to keep it all together and stay sane? And sometimes it's just yelling at me on a video. I know that, but
So there you
we
go.
can maybe hide that from
So
everybody.
that's perfect. Well, let me just go ahead and let everybody who might see this off the hook. I totally am not sane. I'm a hot mess. I'm a faker, and we just keep taking the next step. So I don't think the expectation that it won't be hard is realistic. I think when you dive into this work and you're brave enough to um, take on whatever problem or issue it is that you're taking on, whether you're a nonprofit like us or whether you're trying to solve something in the marketplace, like, there's bravery there, right? And I would say for most entrepreneurs, it's not this idea of, I'm going to make it so big and get loaded. Maybe, like, that's a great byproduct. You know, certainly we want to make money for Faithtree so we can continue to do more things. But I think for
Hmm.
many of us, it's a matter of using your gifts to contribute to the world, because every single person was created on purpose for a purpose. And those of us that have the passion to go out and share our purpose, I think that's a large driver, at least of the entrepreneurs I know. Okay. That being said, I think particularly today in this economy and in this world, and when there's division in so many ways, mental health is a huge issue, not just for teens or for entrepreneurs, but for all of us. And I think there are some best practices that we have rooted in good common sense and in history, right, that our grandparents did, that we have forgotten about. So if I were to call those to mention, it would be number one, slow down. Like, you know, I know we call ourselves the God Squad. I'm certainly from the Christian perspective. And this, if you could just take it at face value, my husband will say to me all the time, Jesus already came, right? Like, you don't have to save anybody. It's like, you take a second, because there were days when I was like getting up at 2 in the morning or 1:30 in the morning. Like, I got to do it. And then I got to be a mom.
Yeah.
So that's just a lie. You're off the hook. You don't have to do all of it because you can't. So if you can just go ahead and put yourself into the reality that slowing down is a blessing. And there's a guy named John Mark Comer who wrote a book called Ruthlessly Eliminate Hurry, which I read probably twice a year now since its release. It's brilliant, and it really it's from a Christian perspective, but there's still value even if you don't follow the Christian tradition. But it basically is like, take a second, like this onslaught of noise. It's just too much. We weren't designed to take that onslaught. So that would be number one. The other thing I would tell you is that we can't eliminate the connection between our mind, our body, and our soul. Like, we are all three parts. Everybody, no matter what faith tradition you profess to believe, but you can't separate one from the other, right? Because you weren't designed that way. So if your physical health is tanked, likely your mental health is tanked. And I mean, I'll just tell you, I'm the worst at that. I'm like, I'll work out, never. I have no interest. When you said your part about like wanting to be someone who goes to the gym, I was like, I don't know what that feels like. I don't even care if you think I go to the gym. I don't. But when I am working out, eating well, getting rest, everything is in better alignment. So I would say that's another thing that's really important, is having people that are focused on mental, physical, and spiritual health. It's a way to be integrated, if you will. And then the next thing I would tell you is you can't drink from an empty cup. So I'm a big believer in educating yourself, studying those people who've done it well, and really honing in on best practices, because a lot of us think we're the expert in everything. Everybody's got a master class now. Okay, well, there's people that have already done it way better than me. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And in fact, kind of one of our core values is, if we see that somebody else in the marketplace is doing exactly what we want to do, we're pretty mindful that we would rather celebrate and propel their particular niche. I mean, this wouldn't work in everything, right? Like, if you make paper towels, it's okay to have more than two people making paper towels. But in the digital content space, we're very mindful. Do we need to have a voice in that space? Because we'd rather celebrate the good work being done by someone else and lead people there, and do that thing which is uniquely Faithtree, and that we've been designed and positioned to do. So,
yeah. Well, I would tell you too that that's really smart from a strictly business standpoint, to limit the number of SKUs that your business opens up. I meet with so many friends that end up opening small businesses, and they get past 5 years, which is sort of I don't know if you know this, it's the line of demarcation, right? For whether or not your business is really going to make it, because most businesses close in the first 5 years for a number of reasons. But what I see with a lot of businesses that have been open that long, they've been like struggling and fighting and grinding and clawing and just trying to get over that hump. And then all of a sudden they're in year 6 or 7, and now they've got some leaders below them and things are slowing down, and they can sort of like step back even further to really work on the business instead of just in the business, like the words go. But what they end up looking at is that they have 50 different SKUs. They have 50 different services or products that they're offering. And maybe, it's the whole Pareto's principle, right? 20% of those items are going to drive 80% of their revenue.
Yeah.
And revenue would probably boom if they focused all their creative efforts on the 20% that were crushing it, and only spent. I love the, I think I may have heard this from like Jim Collins first, but it's like the great companies in the world spend 10% of their budget on R&D, and that's it. And I think there's something powerful to that, because you're like, we're a fanatically disciplined organization to go, hey, this is the 90% of the budget we're going to spend on the things that work. And then we're also going to open up space for 10% to explore and fail and try. And you end up keeping the entrepreneurialness of your organization as you scale and as you grow, versus like a lot of big companies end up becoming like giant whales that just move so slow and don't ever bring anything new on. There's no new growth. And you say this all the time, without growth, there is stagnation. You're either growing or dying. There's no, it's up or down. There is no flat. But I do wonder about how do you handle the speed thing? Because you said the slowing downness, and I struggle with that a lot. Like, I just want to go faster. I want to go harder. I want to go further. Like, talk me out of that. Why is that hurting me versus helping me?
So terrible. Well, here's what I'd say. It's kind of in digital currency, like we operate, right? When you're creating content, if you have too much stagnation, you're dead. Nobody cares, right? Like digital products have a shelf life. And so inherent in the work that we're doing is this idea that you would content create and get more and more. But as far as the slowing down, I think the rhythms of the business and the rhythms of your life are particularly what I'm focused on, because you can create a lot of content. You just have to learn how to like maximize. So for example, you're doing this podcast, so maybe you'll take some video clips out of it, maybe you'll have social posts, maybe you right you so you've told me this, you're my teacher here, which is you have like the media company that has one piece of content that creates many different tentacles so that you can put it out. So it's not really, I'm not as interested in the speed of content creation. Create as much as you want, as fast as you want. What I'm concerned with is this idea that we are like swimming in shallow puddles all day long. We don't go deep anymore because we just go, 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 go. And there's a lesser quality work there. You know, there's not contemplation, there's not think time, there's not culture building, right? So when I look at my team, when we were making the relationship project, man, we drove those guys so hard. And you have to stop and be like, that's not kind. That's not who I want to be person to person. Why am I driving the organization to produce? So can I get practical? What it means to me is having a really good plan from the get-go, right? So a lot of times as an entrepreneur, I'll speak for myself, but I'm like, oh, we should try this. Oh, let's add this. Oh, we'll do this. And it morphs, right? Which happens. But I think if you could really spend a chunk of time planning well, that's an immeasurable blessing for everybody and every single milestone all the way through. And I think we skip that part a lot. I think also making sure that you pool enough resources to begin. It's kind of a hard balancing act, if you will, because if you wait till you have all the resources, you'll never start. But sometimes what we do is we just jump out on a shoestring and a prayer. And I think it hurts us, namely because it doesn't allow us to invite others in that are the caliber of people that we need to make the work scale like we want it to.
Yeah. I suffer from that a lot, especially with the first business I had. I really struggled with, I would have these entrepreneurial ideas and then I would make sure I was the one that went and implemented them. And I wouldn't go find the right person that may be able to take it like, arrogantly, I thought they can't take it as far as I can, when the truth is, and you know this, we've talked about this before, they'll take it much further than I ever could have because of talent and resources and passion and all those things. And it's a lesson that I've even to this point had to, it's a struggle. I mean, your ego gets tied up in a lot of times where it's like, I was the one that did that thing. And that's fine if that's what brings you joy and you never want to evolve past that. But the danger is that your business will hit a plateau and you're just going to get stuck.
How do you, okay, so it's something that I mean, I'm very open to say that I struggle with this all the time. How do you let go of, whether it's arrogance or if it's you're a control freak or whatever it is, that idea of it doesn't all have to be me. Right. So as an organization, we totally want to give credit back to the local church. I mean, Faithtree actually really, we thrive and most fervently want to be anonymous. We want to be invisible so that the local pastor, the local church leader, the local school, whoever's using our stuff, they're the winner and they're the ones thriving. But when you look at the, like on the ground level, like I really like it when.
Yeah, but you're not anonymous inside your organization, right? Like everybody knows who did what and who drove what result.
How do you get rid of that piece?
Well, I can just tell you what happened to me. It was, so Lyles Barbecue Company was my first business, which I've talked about on the podcast a ton. And if Austin was here, my co-founder, he would just roll his eyes because I think at this point he's better at telling the stories than I am. He's heard so many of them. But we started in a tent on the side of the road, and then just through all these entrepreneurial ideas and like sheer willpower and grit and grinding, we built that thing up, multiple locations, and just survived and competed with big guys like Chick-fil-A and McDonald's. And I have a weird love-hate relationship with Chick-fil-A. It's very complicated. I love their sandwiches as a consumer. As a competitor, they just constantly kicked my butt.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
But we ended up growing that business, and we got into the $1 million revenue range. And I think 4% of companies end up crossing $1 million in revenue. So it was a pretty cool thing to do. And to be honest with you, it was on the back of a lot of my ideas and my engine as a leader and as an entrepreneur. And I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything about that, but it's just true. But what I will tell you is that looking back on it, had I not made it all about me, and had I shared the ball more, had I passed it around, we could have been a $3 million business. I'll never know. And what ultimately happened was I kept going, and I never evolved, and I never changed my skill set. And when you get past that $1 million mark, something happens where you have to have other real A players on the team, like at least for a restaurant. I don't know about other industries, but for us, like we needed more A players, and we may have had them, but I just wasn't sharing the ball enough. And we ended up opening a new restaurant concept called Nash's. And it was this massive flop, and there's a whole long story behind it. But basically 4 months later, it was gone, and we took some financial risk to do that, to make it happen. And then 6 months later, the barbecue restaurant was gone. And so it started this chain of events where 6 years of hard work was just gone, essentially in 30 days. Oh. And I was very fortunate to land in a great next job after that, where I had 2 years of safety to like sort of look back and reflect before I launched High B Marketing with Austin. And in that time, I reflected and I realized what I just said, which was, I made it too much about me. I made it too much about I wanted to be the one that people wrote about and put in the local paper and magazines. And like I didn't want to share credit. Like I wanted to be the guy. It was just a very immature, ego-driven thing. And it cost me the business. And so you can do it, and maybe you survive it, but your business will either plateau, or worst case, it'll be like me. I've always been the kind of person, Michelle, I got to touch the stove. I'm not going to believe you when you tell me it's hot. Like I'm going to go touch it. And I had plenty of people telling me that, and I didn't listen.
Well, I think for me, when I hear you describing that experience, and I will tell you, I mean, I have it in 1,000 experiences, but I think it comes to an issue of identity, right? Because for so many of us, whether it's in our business life as entrepreneurs, whether it's in our parenting or in our marriage, like whenever we're looking for something else outside of us to fulfill us as like, this is who I am, which I think for entrepreneurs, like when Faithtree wins, it's like a Michelle win, right? I mean, even for my family, my kids sacrifice a lot for me to work harder. My husband, I mean, God bless these people. They deal with so much just so that I can kind of do what I do. But there's a little bit of a high five and an identity piece that goes into that. And I think one of the things that's super freeing and good for our mental health and actually good for our businesses is when we can kind of extrapolate and differentiate me from my business, because it does come at a high cost, because not only does it allow us to maybe deviate from the mission, right? Because then the mission really becomes self-serving. The
mission was always self-serving. All the words you put on boards and stuff were really just marketing materials, but it wasn't the actual truth, I think.
Yeah. I think that's true for most of us though, right? Like I ask myself all the time, why did I start this organization? Why am I in this role? Is it because, it was put on my heart and this is my skill set and I was created to do this? Hopefully, but for, all intents and purposes, I think it was using my gifts and my interests and kind of leading in my way, which had a lot of self-serving pieces to it. I mean, I think that's natural, but what's exciting about that to me is that as the leader, especially, we have the opportunity to continually revisit how we get better at that, right? It goes back to that brick wall, which is like, okay, that was way self-serving. So I'm going to try and become more self-aware. I'm going to take a moment and see how I could have or would have wanted to do that differently. And I think, I look at some of the leaders that I follow or influencers that really have impact on me, and I think that they just rock. Like those are just naturally great people. But I think we missed like all the mistakes and all of the self-serving or selfish things they did along the way, but they constantly kept refocusing themselves and coming back.
It's interesting.
Sometimes.
I think about it and I'm like, for me, I think it just comes down to ego a lot of times, where you're just saying, I have my own set of gifts that I'm really good at as a person, and whether they've been cultivated or they were put there is sort of up for debate. Maybe, I don't know, but I think we're all wired a certain way, and we need to lean into that. And like you said earlier, you have your strengths, like do them. And so one of my strengths is team building and storytelling and, inspiring and all those things. And when I wasn't, I don't know, a lot of times I ended up feeling bad about having those gifts. Like it feels like like I shouldn't have them and that I should go focus on other things. And so that was another thing that I did a lot back in the day was I ignored the things I was good at. I got in the way of other people doing the things they were good at, and just to like, because I was like so messed up on the inside versus now I'm like, hey, if you're better at accounting than me, great. Like the business can afford to pay it, great. Like we have an accountant out there on the West Coast actually now, and it's awesome. It's way easier for me, and it's life is good now. But back in the day, I did all the bookkeeping for our restaurant for 6 years straight.
Wow. Wow.
And, and that was like at least an hour a day to do that. And, what could the business have done better had I just leaned into my strengths and let somebody else lean into theirs?
Mm-hmm. I think also on that note, one of the things that I've struggled with has been, I tend to feel guilty to ask. So for example, when we brought on an executive assistant, I felt a little shy about like, can you do this for me? And I'm not talking about like, go get me coffee, but like, do you mind sending that email? So handing over certain things took, I think, a maturity on my part to realize that like, there's giftings in what my assistant is able to do that I'm not great at it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a secondary piece, which is, I tend to read my way into anything that's a deficit in the organization to see if I can kind of navigate learning it the hard way. But there are people who have already done the work and who are fulfilled to the work. So when we brought on a woman to do operations for us, it was a life changer, not only for the organization, but for me, because what I didn't recognize was I could ideate all day long. I had all the great ideas in the world. I could actually be pretty tenacious and like play out stuff envelopes for an end of year campaign or whatever that is. Everything in between was just missing. And I was so arrogant to think that I could get us there. But what I didn't realize is that someone has extraordinary operations experience and could get us there so much faster and so much easier.
And love doing it.
Right. And so I would say that's one of the places that self-awareness is a really, really big, at least for me personally, it's a core value. Constantly seek to know yourself better, because then you can get out of the way,
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, now I get to ask this question to everybody that comes on, and I'm very interested to hear your answer with this. It is we call it the 10X question. So if I could 10X your budget tomorrow to help your organization, what would you spend it on?
That's a great question.
Oh, hold on one second. I got another interview here. Hey, Steven, I'm going to cut you out and let you come back in just a little bit. You're fine.
I love it. Hi, Steven. It's good. If I could 10X my business tomorrow, my gut reaction is that I would bring on more people to do some of the things, because as an entrepreneur, one of the things that we do is everything, and it's really not sustainable. But I also think I would help our organization invest more in capacity building measures. So whether that's a studio or equipment, I mean, we are still in a phase now, almost 10 years later, and certainly, our annual budget has grown leaps and bounds from when we first started on a shoestring and a prayer, but to really pour into doing things less off the cuff. Like we're still in our infancy as far as production goes, but I'd love to have studio space and have more equipment that would allow us to have 10 irons in the fire as far as building a content library goes, as opposed to one at a time. So that's probably what I do.
That's good. I mean, I'll tell you, we've asked this question to a lot of people that are in similar size businesses as you guys, and it tends to be that where it's like you sort of have learned, I got to get more help in here to move this ball forward. And I think that's what the best leaders do, is they find who are the best, brightest minds that I can bring in that are all about what we're doing and that we can also pour into their life. And so there's a nice equilibrium balance there between person and organization, and they end up being great teammates that really help you drive the ball forward and make things happen. So I love that. Well, I have a final question here. We talked about earlier, we both have kids, and I was like explaining how both of my kids just give each other diseases, and I'm just stuck being sick for like a month straight. Yeah. And so I got to know, like, what is your family remedy for getting people healthy? Like, I got to share this with the world. Please tell us.
So what we talked, my family will laugh at me because I come from a family of Western medical trained doctors, and I've gone kind of like crunchy, grungy, like alternative medicine in some ways. But we had somebody tell us, one of our kids when they were younger, so this is probably a decade ago, got whooping cough. And somebody told us, cut an onion in half and stick it next to her bed. And when she sleeps, she'll wake up, smelling like a salad, but she'll totally have so much of the cough like remedied. And we're like, you're insane. That's such a dumb piece of advice, but okay, we'll try it. So, because if you've ever had a kid with whooping cough, it is not a joke. You're like, I'm pretty sure they're going to stop breathing at any second. And, for my daughter, I had held her for 2 weeks straight. I sat up holding her upright when she slept because I was afraid that she would lay down and stop breathing. So we tried it, and I mean, son of a gun, it worked. The onion worked. So we have now given much credence to old school, what our grandparents would have done. Like, oregano oil is like an amazing antiviral, or things like my husband makes our kids drink lime water every morning to keep them healthy. And I mean, knock on wood, we can't complain. It seems like a lot of those natural remedies have worked really well for our family. So
I'm just
don't make
thinking
fun of
about
me.
trying to. I'm not making. No, no, no. You don't understand. I'm getting desperate at this point. It's been like 2 months straight of sickness, and I'm
Oh, it's
tired. I'm
hard.
extra tired. I'm barely holding on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I am trying to. I'm laughing thinking about trying to sneak lime juice into my 8-month-old's bottle and
Okay,
seeing
maybe
if I
that'd be a
could
little
get away
rough
with that.
for 8 months. Okay, so for 8 months, maybe
It's
that's
like a
too early.
yeah. It's like a Corona Light for an 8-month-old. That's fine.
That might
Nobody's gonna
burn
care
up
about
his
that.
inside of his stomach. Don't do that.
Oh
Your
my
wife will
gosh.
kill me. But yeah, I do think there's a lot of value because, we can't actually track all the natural remedies and how effective they are because they're not FDA approved, because you can't actually FDA approve nature. So I think we do miss out on a lot of the old school. Like there's certainly a place for medicine. I'm so thankful for penicillin and antibiotics. Like don't get me wrong, it's like some like, crazy like grungy girl, but I do think that going back to the old school, like dairy's kind of weird. When we took dairy out of our kids' diet, like all the like, sorry to be gross, but like coughing gross stuff was largely cut in half because they didn't have that production of it. So I think looking old school is really helpful.
Well, the marketer in me just immediately goes, well, in the 50s or something, I think they had a massive, there was a dip in dairy consumption. And so all the dairy farmers got together and formed a big dairy consortium. And then they started marketing it like crazy, but they did it on television and they did it before everybody else was really in on TV ads. And they were going to where the audience was, something and you and I argue about all the time offline. And they just hammered people with the same message of like, got milk, drink more milk, it's healthy for you, da da da. And then all of a sudden,
And we all
everybody has to drink milk
okay.
with breakfast.
Yep. Okay, we believe you. And listen, I love milk and cheese is my lifeline. Like if you could put it in an IV, that'd probably be where
Mm,
I'd go. But if you
preach.
actually think about it, it's a little weird that we take in the milk.
No, it's not. It is weird, but it's hey, you know what this is proving here that marketing works.
Oh
And
my goodness. You
I'll
taught me that. I know
yeah.
we're coming to a close on our time, but I will tell you, understanding marketing is probably one of the most important things that we've done to move our business to the next level because I always thought like people would just know it and they'd thank us for our good
Yeah.
work. And for so long, we couldn't understand what it took, but going to where our people really are and allowing them to understand that we are a fit where they exhale and they're like, oh, they get it. That has been a
Hmm.
huge game changer for our business because, we just thought, well, we made a great product and everyone should be really excited to use it. And we don't understand why they're not thanking us and, jumping on board. But yeah, that's definitely something you
Yeah.
taught me. Marketing is
It
remarkable.
it's I mean the problem ends up being that you're in it every day and you're so close to it that it's your whole world a lot
That's
of
right.
times, especially your career wise. Like, but that person you're trying to reach, especially for your whole organization, just to be specific, is a pastor or a youth pastor. Like they are busy leading the church, doing things inside of that organization. They're not thinking about what you're doing out there on the West Coast
Yeah,
and digitally. Like they need a reason to think about you. And the cool thing about content marketing and some of the things that our company, High Beam Marketing, can help you with is that you get that opportunity to give that person a reason to think about you. And it's all about, triggering curiosity. And then you need to have something there for them when they go down the rabbit hole to figure out who you are. So generally what we find in our research is that somebody will organically discover a video, whether it's on a YouTube or a TikTok or Instagram or what have you, or even see a Facebook ad. And then they will go down the rabbit hole and go explore you, right? They're going to see what are you all about. So they might go consume 3 or 4 more posts that you had organically if it was an ad. They'll click through to go to your website to see what that's about. So you have to have all that stuff in line and ready to actually close and capture and do all the things if you're going to do marketing well. But yeah, we could have a whole nother podcast if we start talking about like marketing specific stuff. There's a question on the internet where they go, what could you do a 40-minute TED talk on with no preparation? And for me, it's definitely marketing. What would yours be? Do you know?
If I could, I think I would focus on rethinking the way, let me say this, but I think if I could do a 40-minute TED talk, it would be on rethinking where we get value. I think right now we're very skewed in like what we consider, like it's all about accolades and applause and accumulation. And I think that's bunk. It's bogus. Like the money's going to go away. We're all going to be in a ground someday, right? Like all that stuff. I wish we could help the world rethink what it is we value. And that's one of the reasons, I mean, you know how I am always moaning and groaning and complaining about social media and tech and what have you. Sorry, I know, on your marketing podcast. But one of the things that drives me nuts is that I think it's a lie. Like we tell each other, like, you have to be hot, you have to be cute, you have to be all the things. And none of us, like, I mean, I'm wearing Uggs right now. So I have like the suit jacket on. So I look, presentable for you, but it's a lie. And so I wish we could help everybody take in what they're really valuable for. And it really has very little to do with their performance.
Yeah. I find that I'm happiest when I'm focusing on value from an inward state out versus getting it outward in. And that comes with everything from personal life to business to anything. It's like, did I live up to my ultimate potential going to the gym today, working on my business, being a dad, being a husband,
love it,
all those things. So that's great. Michelle, I love you so much. I always enjoy our conversations.
Thank you.
And these are the conversations we have and nobody ever gets to hear when we're talking through all of our client stuff. So I'm so glad that everybody got a little snippet in. We'll have to bring you on for a future episode.
Good.
We'll make sure to link up. Yeah. Yep. We'll make sure to link up all the things for Michelle so you guys can get in touch with her if you want to learn more about her and what she has going on. But yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys listening. We will see you next week. Peace.